Welcome back to In Case You Missed It Wrestling, and it is Tuesday, Tuesday, Tuesday for NXT. NXT put on a pretty decent show last week, but there is a lot to get to. So let's go ahead and get started. We would kick off the night with Tony D'Angelo and the family making their entrance. He would go on to have a match with Ridge Holland for the North American Championship. It's a pretty decent match. Definitely not Ridge Holland's best, but definitely not his worst. Sean Spears would come out and watch them from the ramp, not interfering until late in the match. Tony would end up knocking him off the apron, and the rest of the family would make their way to Spears before being attacked by Nico and Brooks Jensen. The four of them would fight their way backstage. While all this was going on, Ridge Holland would get the upper hand on Tony until Izzy Dame would come out of nowhere and kick Ridge Holland in the face. Tony would take advantage of that and get the win. Izzy would tell Tony that they are even now. We would make our way to the men's locker room with Wes Lee. He would tell Dion Lennox that he is a funny dude for what he said to Oba last. Dion would say that he could be there one day. Now, if we remember, Dion Lennox would say to Obafemi that he looks forward to challenging him for the NXT championship one day. Wes would fire back saying that there's a big difference between a superstar with potential and a decorated superstar just like himself. Dion would say, what better way to prove himself than by beating a former champion, and challenges Wes Lee to a match. Trick Williams would walk in and Wes Lee would mention that we have a former champion in our midst. And Trick Williams would slap the taste out of the mouth of Wes Lee after he made a few comments about him losing. Bailey would make her entrance into NXT and says she came out last week because she cares about Roxanne. She cares about the legacy that she has built and everything that she has done for the NXT women's division. But all it got her was a big slap in the face. She took Roxanne's words about Natalya and Punk as a compliment. People like them have built a foundation for what we have today. Bailey says she didn't come back to NXT because NXT owes her anything, and NXT doesn't owe Roxanne either. She came back because she owes it to NXT to get rid of entitled little idiots. She believes that Roxanne loves her because she showed up to Smackdown last week and Raw last night. She calls Roxanne lame for not having a better plan than attacking Bailey from the seats. And to her, it doesn't prove that she's ready for the main roster. It doesn't prove that she is the leader of the youngest locker room in the WWE right now. She says the sky is the limit for the roster with Julia as champion. Julia would make a surprise entrance and say that Roxanne may not look up to Bailey, but Julia sure does. She hopes to hold the title with as much honor and love for NXT as Bailey did. Bailey says that means a lot to her and that she has so much respect for her, and she is a huge fan. She knows Julia will make some historic moments of her own because the title changes your career and it means everything to her and to the fans. The title changed the landscape of not only NXT, but the WWE as a whole. Before she could finish, Roxanne and Cora Jade would interrupt her. Roxanne would say that she is surprised she could show her face around here after two embarrassing losses back to back. She would tell Bailey that she needs to drop the act and stop acting so innocent because if she actually cared about the future, she wouldn't have punched her in the face last night. Roxanne says she is not the only one that can see right through her. Cora can too. The crowd was booing when they came out, and when she hits this line, they take it to another level. You can hardly hear them talk. They're getting the Dominic Mysterio treatment. There's a lot of disdain from the NXT audience for Roxanne and Cora Jade. Cora would say that she sees right through Bailey, and she is no role model because a role model doesn't come into NXT when it's cool. Role models would build this place up when people like Bailey choose to leave. As far as Cora is concerned, Julia can hand Roxanne back the title because no one can carry it the way she did. Nobody loves it the way they do, and they didn't have to compete overseas to realize it. They've been holding it together since day one. Roxanne would go on to say that she isn't going to take anything away from what Bailey has done because she has done everything in the WWE. But thank you for your service because it is no longer needed. Roxanne says she knows exactly why she is here, and it's because Bailey wants to be NXT Women's Champion. She wants to be the number one woman on the number one women's roster because she knows deep down it has exceeded the four horsewomen era. Bailey and Julia would attack Cora and Roxanne, and Bailey and Julia would end up standing tall. We would move into the women's locker room where Jada Parker is watching all of this unfold. She would say that Bailey has mentioned her name 2 weeks in a row. Kalani Jordan would chime in and say that she has mentioned her name before Jada's. Jada would fire back with saying the attitude Kalani is trying isn't working and she should go back to the drawing board. Kalani would say that being rude doesn't make you real. They begin to bicker before Carmen Petrovic chimes in and says it doesn't matter because love is in the air. She tells Kalani that she loves her, but before she could say anything about Jada, she would be cut off. Jada dares her to talk about her. Carmen is confused why Jada is coming after her, and Jada asks why Carmen is in her business. Is it because she finally got a kiss from a guy that will leave her in a few months? Carmen would tell her to watch her mouth when she's talking about her man. Jada calls him Nikita's man before they would start fighting. We would also then cut back to the ring where Roxanne and Cora Jade are still fighting Bailey and Julia. After the commercial break, we would go into Dion Lennox versus Wes Lee. Wes Lee would end up winning after an impressive match from Dion Lennox. We haven't seen a ton from Dion Lennox, and I feel like every time I do see him, I'm impressed with his ability. I'm not 100% sure his character is there yet. He's not, he's definitely not ready to make the jump to the main roster, and I don't think he's quite ready to be strapped up just yet. But I think we're getting close. I think he's finally about to make a break and maybe make a turn in his character, hopefully for the better. Because right now, kind of boring. He just seems like a smart guy. Like, there's not much of a character. It's not really doing anything for him exactly. But putting on matches like he did with Wes Lee last week will definitely put him in more people's eyes and grant him favor when his time does come. Wes Lee was great as always. He should be making a move to the main roster very soon. I don't know how soon, but I would assume if not this year, next year for sure. Wes Lee would cut a promo after the match telling Trick Williams to get out there, saying that Trick thinks he is that guy walking into the locker room and slapping him in the face. He says he's going to take care of him next week in Atlanta. Trick would come out full on swinging and would end up standing tall over all three of the people with Wes. He would grab the mic and say, if he wants him, he got him. We would move into Stephanie Vakir backstage. Says she wants the North American Championship. Fatal Influence is doing everything they can to stop that. She says that she is not going to stop because Fallon wants to play with her opportunity. Shotzi has benefited from this situation, and she would go on to tell Shotzi that if she becomes champion, she will meet hell. And Fallon, you can run, but you cannot hide. We'd move into the Heritage Cup match with Charlie Dempsey and Lexis King. Now, Lexis King did win last. Now, Lexis King won 2 weeks ago after a final death match with Charlie Dempsey for the cup after there was a little bit of confusion and some foul play in their last match. I do believe that Charlie Dempsey is the future of wrestling. His style is classic yet modern, and it adapts well to anybody that he's wrestling. Lexus King at one point would look into his bucket and see some brass knuckles, and he would be conflicted about using them again, and that would come into play throughout the entire match. Lexus King would pick up a pinfall during the picture in picture break, which honestly pissed me off because getting a point in a cup match is big. That's something we should be watching, should be hearing the commentary on, all of that. Why are we doing this in picture? It pissed me off. It made me so mad. Charlie Dempsey would then pick up his first fall in the next round, and Lexus King would pick up the second and final fall after a low blow to Charlie Dempsey while the ref was distracted. All in all, it was a great match. A great cup match. I really enjoy the cup matches. I haven't watched one that I was really just indifferent or kind of hated. I look forward to the cup matches every time they're on a card, and this one was no exception. This one was great. It was a really, really good one. We would go backstage with Bianca Belair and Naomi saying that the Meta Girls are putting in work to get a shot at their titles. They hyped them up before saying that they might have forgot who the Glow and EST are, because nobody does it better than them. So they better bring all they got, plus more, in Atlanta. They want to take the titles off of them. We would then go backstage with Hank and Tank and Andre Chase. They're checking on Andre Chase because he has been incredibly mopey and just kind of being a Debbie Downer all over the place after Chase U closed down. Andre Chase tells Hank and Tank just to break up now because all tag teams just end in heartbreak, and tells them that they should be looking out for themselves. Hank and Tank say they aren't breaking up, and Andre tells them to forget he even said anything. He would walk away to another group of stars watching some old Chase U videos. Kale Dixon would approach Andre Chase and tell him that he's a total BA. We all should know what BA stands for. Andre says he was a BA, but Chase U is dead. After Andre walks away, Kale would say, it doesn't have to be, leading me to believe we may see a return of Chase U. We haven't seen a single member of Chase U outside of Andre Chase since his match with Ridge Holland, and I'm pretty disappointed by that. They were all incredible wrestlers and put on great shows every week, and so I am kind of sad we haven't seen them in a while, but I'm interested to see what they have for them in the future. We would move into Carmen Petrovic versus Jada Parker. Carmen would be accompanied by Ashante the Adonis, and they would go on to have a pretty good match. I think both of these women have a bright future with the WWE if all goes well. They both kind of wrestle with a very tough style, as Carmen has participated in a few Bloodsport events, which, if you haven't watched any Bloodsport events, they're fantastic. And we will be watching the next one in the Discord. So make sure you're in the Discord for that, because I think it's coming up in a few weeks. I'll for sure make an announcement about it whenever I know the date. At the time of this recording, I just know that it is in London. So Kalani Jordan would come out to distract Jada Parker, allowing Carmen to get a roll-up pin win, and Kalani and Jada would just end up arguing after. No fighting, just arguing. We would go backstage to the women's locker room once again. Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend talking about what Naomi and Bianca had to say earlier. Sol Ruka and Zarya walk up. Jakara says she knows what they want the first opportunity when they win the championship. Sol will cut Jakara off, saying, do you guys understand how big your match is next week? The Meta Girls and Union would say, duh. Zarya would tell them that she doesn't think they do. Sol would say, not only do you have the opportunity to win the tag team championships, but you also have the opportunity to bring them to the best women's division in the world. Lash would tell Sol that she has a point, and this is the biggest match of their career. And she gets to go home to her city, Atlanta, and compete in front of her friends and family and get to step into the ring with two former world champions. Jakara would go on to say that if they are the two most accomplished women in WWE history, the Bougie Bully and Miss Jackson are going to bring the action, because when they do, every woman could get a chance at those titles. Gigi Dolan and Tatum Paxley would walk in and say that they like the sound of that. Now, the women's tag division on NXT is growing, and it is incredible. Not having a tag team championship down there is an incredible disservice, and I do believe we should be getting a belt specifically for the NXT brand pretty soon. We would move into Brooks and Nico versus the Family. This match would start incredibly chaotic, with the Family attacking Brooks and Nico before they could even get to the ring. It's actually an incredible tag team match. Might be one of the best tag team matches we've seen in a couple months on the WWE brand. It was just the right amount of chaos and the right amount of wrestling mixed in together to form a beautiful tag team match. Now, I don't know much about Nico. I think he's just kind of spawned out of the last couple of days, but Brooks Jensen is a second generation wrestler, and the Family has some incredible talent in there. I think a lot of these guys will end up being maybe not main event caliber talent right now, but they definitely could run a mid card on the main roster for sure. Very exciting, very fun match. I would 100% go watch this again. We would move backstage with Fraxium. They would begin talking about their successful title defense at TNA Genesis against the Rascals. They would be asked about the future with the tag division. You never know who's next up. Frazier would chime in and say one thing he knows is they are the best tag team in the world. And Thursday on TNA against the Rascals, they will be the victors. Briggs and Inamura would walk up and saying, "What part of We Got Next do you two not understand? You took a field trip to TNA and forgot about us," Briggs says. He doesn't like that too. Nathan Frazier would rebut by saying there is a difference between wanting a tag title match and deserving one. Besides, who did they ever beat? OTM runs in and attacks Briggs and Inamura after their attack last week. We would cut to Dion Lennox backstage throwing a tantrum after how his match ended and saying, "F this place," and walking out. Tony D'Angelo and Izzy Dame would also be seen talking backstage. Izzy would say that Spears is either crushing or delusional, and she doesn't know which one. Tony says they could go on and on, but he has places to be. Izzy would leave him as the Family walked up. They asked Tony where he was, and Tony said he was trying to get out there, but Izzy just kept going on and asked how the Family did. They would say that they lost and they were waiting for him to come out there, and they were worried about it. Spears was out there with his guys. Tony says that he is fine, but Izzy just kept talking. Stax would come back and say that they needed. Tony says that Stax has been the underboss for 2 years now, and he can figure out how to handle it on his own. Could be some cracks in the Family forming, and I surely hope not. They're one of my favorite parts of NXT. We would then get an Ethan Page vignette. Ethan would say he didn't want to have to do what he did to Dante Chen, but he was riding a high after shaking hands with the final boss. Says Dante wants to stand on some moral high ground. Now he can't stand at all. It still echoes through his head. He never knew he could enjoy the sound of human bones breaking. Dante screamed out in pain, just like Cedric Alexander and just like Javon Evans. Says, "Now, Javon, you must never want to speak normal again. Why else would you come to the ring in the state you're in? I blasted you in the face one time and drew blood. This is the last warning. The next time they cross paths, it won't just be one punch. Ethan won't stop. We would see Javon with Ava backstage, and Javon asks Ava if she saw that. Ava says yes, she did. Javon says he needs Ethan Page. Ava says she gets it, but his jaw is still broken, and he nearly broke it again last week when he took another punch from Ethan Page. She talked to medical, and he is anything but cleared. But Cedric is. Cedric says he would get even for both of them when it comes to Ethan Page. Grayson Waller and Austin Theory would then walk in. Theory says he wanted to tell Ava that she's doing an amazing job as GM, and I have to agree with Austin Theory. Waller says she is way better than Aldis, that's for sure. Ava says she appreciates it, but they were set for next week, and asks why are they here now. Waller would say they are good guys and wanted to say thank you for letting the winner of the NXT Championship match come on to the Grayson Waller show next week. Theory would say they're a pretty big deal in Atlanta, so they need some extra security. We would then get a pretty cool shot of DDP shown in the crowd before the match. We love DDP around here. He has done some incredible things for former wrestlers and just the world in general through his DDP yoga and a couple other things that he does outside of the WWE. Big fan of DDP. I was a fan of his when he was with WCW and with WWE, and I am still a fan of his today. But Obafemi and Eddie Thorpe would face off in a pretty straightforward match. A completely expected outcome, but it was still pretty good. I feel like every time I watch Eddie Thorpe, a little part of me starts to become a fan, but then every time he opens his mouth, that little part dies. I'm not 100% sold on Eddie Thorpe. I think he has the potential, but there's something missing. Something is off about Eddie Thorpe, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what Eddie Thorpe is missing for me to be a fan. He has all the markers of a great wrestler. He's good in ring. He can talk. I think some of the things he says are pretty cringe, but he has the ability to cut a promo. He has the ability to draw emotion out of the audience. But something's just missing, and I'm not sure what it is. Hopefully I can figure it out and maybe kind of get over that and become a fan of his, because it looks like they're pushing for him to be the future of NXT. And if that's the case, I'm not quite excited about it. But the match of the night was 100% without a doubt Jensen and Nico versus the Family. Fantastic tag team match. If you've got the time, it was like 20 minutes. Go and watch it. Maybe not even 20. It might have been 15. But if you got the time, go and watch it. It's well worth the watch. It's insanely fun, incredibly chaotic, and well worth your time. Next week, we have a stacked lineup because they are heading to Atlanta. Just like we talked about earlier, they always do it big for these non-performance center shows. So they have an incredible lineup for us with the WWE Tag Team Championship match with the Meta Girls and Naomi and Bianca. Bailey and Julia versus Roxanne and Cora Jade. Trick Williams versus Wes Lee. Cedric Alexander versus Ethan Page. Grayson Waller effect with Obafemi and Shotzi versus Fallon Henley for the Women's North American Championship. An incredibly stacked card. Only 2 title defenses, but that's all right. They have Vengeance Day coming up very soon, so I assume we will be getting some setup for Vengeance Day for the people that are not fighting tonight. But that will be it for this episode. Tomorrow, we will tackle Saturday night main event. This has been In Case You Missed It Wrestling, and I am your host, Blackhawk. I will see you tomorrow.